Thank you, Ron, for being here and for joining this webinar on this afternoon on a Thursday in Philippine times, and then also we are early morning European time for those of us joining us from Europe or Africa. And just as the rules, everyone, please ask questions throughout the webinar. You have the Q&A option underneath. We'll address as many questions as possible at the end of this, but feel free to ask the questions before and throughout our conversation as well. And then we can ask questions also directly later. If you don't want to write your questions, you can ask for permission to speak, and then I'll have a little notification on my Zoom, and then I can let you speak, and then we can ask a question in that way. So basically, I think we can kick off now for real. Ron, thank you so much for joining. It's obviously an honor to have you here, and we're happy to have this conversation. I would maybe like to start with the basics for those of you. I'm sure there are some of our audience here that knows you, but maybe starting for those that don't know you that well, can you tell us a bit more about Zurich Finance and the Rural Bank of San Antonio, and especially what are your roles in these respective financial institutions?
All right. So thank you, Nicola. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here and participate in this panel discussion on finance institutions in the Philippines and what we're doing to kind of respond to what's been going on around us these past few months. So Zurich, I guess that's where we can start, because we partnered with Oradian around 3 years ago, and Zurich is a finance and lending institution which focuses on motorcycle financing. And at the time when we partnered, I was one of the managing directors of Zurich Finance, and what we were doing at the time was trying really to figure out a way of kind of centralizing a lot of our loan operations, a lot of our lending functions, because we had this kind of growing problem of essentially it's a scaling problem that we were facing, and we were trying to look at different partners to give us that opportunity to address those operational issues. And then I guess kind of fast forward to now, Rural Bank San Antonio, these are kind of under the same kind of group of companies as which is why I'm now here with the Rural Bank, and my role is currently the president of the company.
I have to remember to unmute myself every time I start talking. This is one of those things that you have to learn the hard way. It happened to me many times that I'm talking and then people are signaling to me that I'm not being heard. So you mentioned about Zurich as well. And you said it's a motorcycle financing. And then who would you say are usually your clients? Can you tell us slightly bit more on your client base, for example?
So our client base are, I guess we've partnered with a motorcycle dealership that they're the ones that sells the motorcycles, and what we do is we just give financing and installment options to their buyers. So in a way, we're servicing their customers, and their branches, our partner dealerships are sort of all around Southern Luzon area, and so wherever they are, that's where we are also. And so we service their customers, and we give them payment options, and we also kind of we were trying to give them more like options for payments, and so that's one of the things that we were looking at the time, why we encountered Oradian also. So our customers are mainly in provincial areas. We tend not to stick to kind of dense cities, so we don't operate inside Manila, but primarily South Luzon.
Mhm. Makes sense. So it's a very, in a way, regionally focused
Mhm.
business. And you said 3 years since you got in touch with Irradian. Can you tell us a bit more about what products from Irradian you're using, and then also what is probably very interesting to some of our potential customers. Our customers probably know that already. How did you decide to move to Irradian? Are we talking about Zurich here, especially, right?
Okay. So currently we apart from the core software Instafin, we also partnered in using the messaging service and the IFO, the field officer app service. And uh, yeah, um, uh, sorry, what is the second part of that question? Sorry, your mic is muted.
AC as it happens.
Yeah.
But thank you. It's how did you decide? Well, you said 3 years ago. How did you decide to move on to Radian? And then, since you mentioned that you're using the Instafin Field Officer app and the messaging service as well at Zurich, how did you decide also to go for the additional products? And what did you see? Maybe
Hmm.
the added value of that as well, perhaps.
I think what we um, so why we partnered with Aradian, it's a bit of a kind of a funny story, because how we encountered Aradian was I was still it's actually way before it was a couple of months before I entered Zurich Finance, and at the time I was taking graduate studies on business, and uh, I was taking a course on microfinance, and uh, this was at um, this was at AIM, and I think at the time Oradian was doing rounds with different educational institutions, or just looking at different ways to kind of get the word out on this new technology, cloud-based technology, especially for microfinance institutions. And somehow I heard about, like, I encountered I think Oradian through that class. One of the professors invited a representative from Oradian, and um, but it didn't stick with me at the time. I think it was just sort of a name, and then kind of the general service. And when I entered Zurich Finance, we were going over operational problems, concerns we were facing, because uh, our core platform, or rather our internal loans monitoring system, a lot of that was uh, still very manual, and so we were kind of monitoring a lot of accounts through these through basic Excel, or um, yeah, just through email and just through phone calls. And so of course that's a logistical nightmare. You can't effectively manage all of those loans just on Excel, and we needed ways to kind of streamline that process. Uh, and yeah, so we kind of that's when sort of the company Oradian kind of started. I kind of floating back into my memory, and I remember um, I was having kind of a discussion with the board, with the Zurich board, and we said, okay, we need to look for a system to kind of address these issues. And so Oradian was one of the names that sort of came up, and we went through that whole process of evaluating the core services, and the partnership, and evaluating all of the different uh, potential benefits. And I I think because we were also kind of constrained by time, uh, within, I think, just a couple of months, we had put Oradian in the list of companies to look at, and then very quickly we were able to shortlist that, and uh, shortly thereafter partner with Oradian to become users of InstaFin.
Perfect. Thank you. And
Mhm.
so, since it's in a way a funny story, something that floated, as you said, in your business school, and then perhaps you could apply this for when you basically joined, or when you started heading those operations at Zurich. And how do you once so adapt, moving in like a new, what instead in what we call a core banking system, what it is? How did you see any improvements right after adopting it, and especially in your operations, right? How would you describe this, mm, uh, from the perspective of running an institution like Zurich?
I think what we were what we were trying to really do was centralize everything, and because I think the challenge with monitoring or uh, uh, trying to run a financial institution over many different locations is really consistency of operations. And so one of the things that we one of the challenges that we faced was actual enforcement of loan policies. And so because everything was so decentralized, the interpretation of the loan policies varied from location to location. And to a certain extent, that could be beneficial to the organization if um, uh, especially because you want to look at the local economic conditions, and that sort of plays a role in how you evaluate uh, repayment capabilities of customers. But then uh, I think there comes a point where uh, you're no longer, at least operationally, you're no longer making concessions on behalf of those communities, but you're really simply not enforcing those loan policies anymore. So, I think it can't be helped that corners were cut in the evaluation because it's simply it's too logistically challenging to review all of the, let's say, all of the loan applications coming in from all of these different areas. And so uh, like in a way we needed to kind of centralize the review, and but centralizing the review also posed kind of additional challenges, which just sort of you're effectively moving the problems in one area to one to another area. You're consolidating all of those problems. And so I think one of the major improvements that we address, or one of the things that ended up as one of those major improvements, was the way that we could implement loan policies over a larger area, where uh, because because of the way that INSAFIN is designed, the mandatory fields and the way that I guess we've kind of created a new workflow for our loan applications. Um, we didn't necessarily have to make those concessions on our policies anymore. We were able to kind of roll them out, and uh, just because of those mandatory fields, we were able to kind of implement those policies over a larger area.
And you said
Yeah.
something very interesting that struck my mind, like this, struck a note. It's like, you said that you need consistency in operation and scaling. That's a very interesting. That's something that maybe can our other customers can definitely probably relate to. Um, Another small digression on that. Like, for example, and we mentioned our what we call additional services, the InstaFin Field Officer app, which is an app where you can basically, as its name says, you can use it to go in the field, and it works even offline. But then once you get connected online, it uploads all the data from the field, from the people that are actually on the field, and then the messaging service as well. How did you decide to interact with it as well? I actually use it as well. Was it an immediate decision, or is it something that came in later, or that you added on as, additional services? And how did that actually help your operations, if it helped? Let's assume that.
Oh, I think like why we even considered the availing of this service, this additional service, is um, uh, because I think uh, the relationship between Zurich and Oradian, um, uh, I think had a big part to play in that, because uh, not just with customer support, but especially with your customer success team, one of the things that we like to talk about is how can we constantly improve, and how can we regularly address operational challenges. And working with Philip, one of your customer success managers, uh, we sort of pinpointed certain areas within the operation that could vastly improve with the use of and it wasn't immediately like, okay, we need this type of service, but we really kind of looked into
Mhm.
step by step what those challenges were. And for example, one of the main considerations why we um, uh, looked into this uh, field officer app service is because of lack of internet connectivity.
Mhm.
And we needed to find a way to continue operations without being disrupted by having no internet, or having, especially in areas where there are a lot of typhoons, when um, when the power goes out, internet goes out, and so they're sort of stuck, not being able to post transactions. And so we were looking for ways to address that. One of the solutions proposed was this field officer app, which is kind of interesting, because it wasn't necessarily designed for that purpose. Because as I understand, that the field officer app is designed for microfinance institutions, where you have collectors that go around these different communities, and then they install they visit different centers, and they visit different groups, and they collect in those areas. And um, but one of the operational challenges that we faced was these kind of regular blackouts or seasonal blackouts. And so when we decided to use the field officer app, it's really we looked into that feature, which allows users to post transactions offline, and it doesn't have to be you don't unlike the core platform, which is web based, and uh, you need to have a, a steady connectivity for that. The field officer app allows our operations to be kind of somewhat in the middle ground, where we don't necessarily have to be regularly online, and we just have to kind of structure the day-to-day transaction around kind of these syncing processes that will allow us to continue providing our services even though we don't have stable internet.
I see.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very
yeah,
interesting use case, actually, where the original intention was actually, I'm sure it was part of the ideas to have IFOA service, whenever there is, like, for example, lack of connectivity. But exactly as you say, the name is the field officer app, so it allows people to go in the field, especially maybe in a little bit more remote areas where internet is not as stable, but let them still run operations. But then you provided us with an additional use case,
yeah.
and
And I think that that's kind of what like a lot of our discussions with the customer success team is primarily kind of figuring out these alternative use cases, because the field officer app for us, again, we're not a microfinance institution, and so we don't have collectors going around.
Mhm.
But then because the field officer app can onboard potential clients, and you can encode initial client information from applicants. The other use case that we're looking into is this is being able to, because we do have, while we don't have field collectors, we do have um, credit investigators, and so we deploy these credit investigators to validate information that was submitted from our customers. And so the other use case that we've envisioned for the field officer app is to streamline this process rather than because the field officer app also contains the scorecard module of Instafin. We were able to upload our risk assessment sheet, and then have rather than having our credit investigators prepare a separate report, everything is integrated within the app itself. And so they don't necessarily have to be online, but they can prepare the risk assessment sheet on the field. They can snap photos of the client and their and other things that we would need to gather for us to be able to make a decision on their application. So that's one of the things that at least in the initial, if you look at the service description of the IFOA app, I don't think it's there. It's not the.
It's definitely been added since, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Perfect. So let's. I want to switch to the other part as well, because time is always flying in these situations. Talking about the Rural Bank of San Antonio, but I'm just going to remind our audience that there already are some questions that we're going to address them as soon as possible. But feel free to ask questions throughout the talk. We're going to address them later. It's better if they line up, and then otherwise, sometimes we get all the questions at the end, and we're going to wait. We're trying to address them all at once. So feel free to ask questions throughout. Please don't be shy in any way. This is why we're here. We like answering questions in a way, and then any other use case that you might have from your institutions that you can ask, or worst case scenario, we can't answer the question. We will more than happy to answer it later, but we'll definitely address it here. Ron, so as I said, the Rural Bank of San Antonio, you mentioned about Zurich being a very particular type of financial institution, not being a microfinance institution per se, as you said, but a financing company in a very specific niche. But I would say Rural Bank of San Antonio is more of a traditional, financial institution. Can you tell us about obviously your role there, but also the overall overall function of the Rural Bank of San Antonio, where it operates, and also who your clients are, basically the same as you did for Zurich.
So Rural Bank San Antonio. So I'm the current president of Rural Bank San Antonio, and you're right. It's a traditional rural bank. It's a much older institution, and so in a way, Zurich is I don't know, 4 years old at this point. It's very new, and so like that when Zurich started, it's almost as if kind of our partnership with Aradian was very close to the very beginning of Zurich Finance. But the Rural Bank San Antonio, that's a much older institution, and it's over 50 years old. I think it's 55 years now, if I'm not mistaken. And because it's a traditional rural bank, there are I guess stricter protocols. I guess in general, it's a more professionalized institution, and so because of the way that it's structured, we really needed to be kind of more aware of the services that we that we partner with. And so, in a way, when we initially partnered with Aradian 3 years ago, it was kind of like a test run
Mhm.
for Rural Bank San Antonio. So this was kind of an internal consideration also of the board, was whether or not this cloud-based system can be used within the rural banking, like for the rural bank, because as you know, it's more highly regulated. So we wanted to see whether or not, like even 3 years ago, we were having I know Rural Bank was having this discussion, whether or not uh, we can also enter a partnership with Aradian. And then over the years, we were just kind of, as we developed our relationship with Aradian and as we became further, I guess, users of Instafin, we had a deeper appreciation as to what the system, the implications of this type of system to a financial institution. And then we became more aware, and because since the rural banking industry is I guess it's a very traditional industry. There are a lot of hurdles to get over when approaching these types of new technology, and so that's why it kind of took us a long time to uh, to make that assessment. And well, it was just this year that we were finally able to partner with Aradian. Uh, I think mostly because not only of our experience, our 3 year experience with Zurich, but then because of this pandemic and this kind of cultural shift towards digital services. And even if let's say the past couple of years, BSP and other, yeah, I guess primarily BSP has this digital, this initiative to digitalize rural banks. We I think the impact of that for, I guess, smaller rural banks like ours was not as immediately felt, and the initiative was not, couldn't really be, I guess, translated into something more tangible. And so for a long time, I think that part was really not that,
Mhm.
not that, not that. It wasn't taken very seriously.
And it's interesting you mentioned COVID as well, which is obviously my question. We are still ongoing, a global
Hmm.
pandemic and lockdowns from country to country. I don't know how it is right now, a day-to-day feeling in the Philippines and how it's affecting your operations in a way. I mean, I do know in a way, but you can obviously address that as well. But you mentioned that you decided, especially because of COVID. Would you say that that the whole COVID situation, obviously, we know that a lot of financial institutions in the Philippines and of course everywhere, have issues like collections, obviously operations, even like opening hours for branches and communicating with clients. All those issues are very very new. For example, that maybe didn't exist, at least not in this capacity, a year ago or so. Um, from the perspective of the Rural Bank of San Antonio, like did this COVID situation speed up? Would you say that it speed up your decision to go in the cloud that you said, or did it maybe made it slower, or did it made it more decisive? How would you describe it in reference to COVID?
I think it really sped up that process, because we were already on that path, and we were already making internal studies as to whether or not this is a good idea, like when should we partner. And it wasn't, given that there were already, it was already kind of internally determined that this is the right path.
Hmm.
It was, I think, primarily because this pandemic situation, kind of, we recognized how important it is to have, I guess, a flexible core banking software. And we noticed certain things about how the I mean, when if you compare the internal, if you compare, I guess, the rural bank versus the Zurich, we noticed certain differences in the way that each institution responded to the, let's say, the situation of our borrowers. And our because of the way that we had structured our operations for the rural bank, we couldn't immediately, especially with the Bayanihan Act and the push from government to restructure some of these loans, we weren't as quick to respond, and a lot of our adjustments still were manually encoded, and we have it's putting really a strain on our operations just to uh, comply with government regulations, and as opposed to the way that I understand Zurich has responded uh, to the push from government to restructure these loans. I think for the Bayanihan 2, with
Mhm.
the emergency relief feature, we were able to make those adjustments to a lot more of our customers there, uh, with very little work. Yeah.
I see. That's a very interesting point. I think that then this is the title of this session is doubling down on digitalization as well. And I thought about from how I thought about this before our talk, like how as a financial institution in a dire situation like this, I could probably go both. I can go two ways, right? In terms of digitalization, and I can go conservative in terms of cloud and digitalization, and I can go more progressive. And it's either way you have to double down in your direction because times are tough in a way, and we can't really hide from that. And but you went the way of, okay, so this is the problem we're having. This is the direction we're going anyways. We believe, at least this is what I'm what I get from what you're saying, is we believe this is the right way to go. And then, but we have to do it now, we have to do it faster, because just exactly because the times are dire, because the times are tough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I just realized it now that the title kind of makes sense also because in a way we've partnered twice. We've really kind of doubled down in this digitalization, I guess, investment by kind of going into this partnership twice. But you're right. I think the other approach, you said the alternative, uh, is it's one way or the other. It's either you digitize, and then you kind of commit to that strategy, or you go the other way. And I think you just look at your existing processes, and then you just try to optimize that as much as possible, and you try to develop your people, and you try to um, because you actually, there was one question that you prior to this, uh, prior to now, you had sent me kind of a list of
Mhm.
questions that you might ask, and one question kind of stood out to me, and uh, it's one that it just kind of stuck with me, which is uh, an alternative to digitization or digitalization.
Like,
Um,
is there any, right?
yeah, is there an alternative? And then kind of I think my opinion on that is the alternative is you can just cut back everything. You can just try to optimize as much as possible. Like if you can't manage, like if you can't manage growth, then you just kind of cut away everything else that sort of uh, lends towards growth, and then you just, let's say, focus on one branch. I don't know, like that's
Mhm.
For some reason that kind of stuck with me, and I thought, yeah, what you can do is just all of the operational concerns that have to do with growth, you just sort of take it out, and then you just look at deepening the relationship, let's say, in one area, because that's really what you can. I think that's what you can
Mhm.
productively and efficiently do. But because I think digit digitalization is really kind of an investment in growth. Like if you want to grow, you need to digitalize. That's the two go hand in hand. And if you don't want to digitalize, you sort of you not growing is also an option. I don't know. Like
It's interesting, yeah. Defining priorities as a financial institution is definitely, I mean, like any business, I would say it's obviously strategies and priority is
Mhm.
it's a crucial part. I don't necessarily want to say the hardest part, but definitely crucial part. And then this is something I definitely want to talk about to you this conversation as well. Our time is going fast, and questions are coming in. Keep asking the questions. I promise we're gonna address them all. Um, Speaking of digitalization, one more question on the rural bank of San Antonio right now, from your perspective. If we take COVID aside and all this strategy, digitalization, and you put it very nicely, you said it's a prerequisite, for growth, or it's an investment in growth, even better. Um, in terms of concrete products in banking, from what you offer usually, and in terms of digital products, what did you see as the future path, even if we take COVID aside? What services of, let's call it, modern digital banking do you see as you wanting to implement? Is it like mobile banking? We can we had clients, and the possibility now of connecting with ATMs, APIs for all kinds of digital products. Now, what is, in terms of your priorities there, or what is your on your wish list, let's call it that way?
I think in a way, I think the future is already here because a
Mhm.
lot of those services are already available. It's just primarily available to larger banks, commercial banks. You have mobile banking. Um, you have ATMs. You have, I guess, bills, payment, like integration with billers. And I think, in a way, like those financial services are generally um, it's difficult to implement for rural banks given our size and given our access to these resources. And so uh, you'll see. I mean, just
It almost
comparing, let's
becomes
say,
easier, right? Like, it's almost with time, and let's assume the cost of these services and the ability to implement and connect, what was unimaginable maybe for you. I would, and please correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it was unimaginable for you to have something like mobile banking 5 years ago, right? But now you can, as a rural bank, you can actually consider it and say, like, yeah, this is not something commercial banks have. This is something that we can or want to offer to our audience as well, to our clients.
yeah, and like the I guess the benefits of, for example, mobile banking. Um, it's weird because, like, I think the distribution of services is just kind of, it's sort of the opposite way, where you have, I guess, especially in rural banking and countryside banking, you have people who are in need of, like, better financial services, but then the better financial services are provided only to those, let's say, already the banked individuals, and so the distribution is kind of, it's a bit off there, and it's like these services that make it easier for you to access your deposits, for you to create deposit accounts, for you to apply for loans. Um, the actual, I guess, uh, I guess what these new digital services do is they make that more accessible to you as a consumer outside of visiting a bank branch,
Mhm.
and that's great and all. And but in the communities that we serve, in the communities that we're a part of, that's not necessarily the case. And I think why the thing that's sort of happening now is uh, we're sort of the acceptance of these types of services, where previously there was just this feeling of, oh, that stuff is, it's more for those who are banked, for those living in denser populated cities. uh, we're seeing that even now our customers are starting to want or are expecting that type of service. And so we're kind of in an interesting position, because uh, that I don't know if it's ever happened before, where uh, all of a sudden, almost overnight, people are like asking for, oh, for example, like these e-wallets, Gcash, are, customers will start asking, oh, can I pay via Gcash? That was never like I don't think that has ever happened like before, where like just overnight people just started, oh, I have this electronic wallet, can I pay my loans through that platform? And uh, all of a sudden we're realizing, oh, okay, so what would have normally taken years for I guess, especially outside of the main cities, would have taken years to adapt these
Mhm.
it's happening very, very quickly. And on our side, we also need to be able to kind of lean into that and provide that service, because I mean, it's not only expected, but it also improves, like it also makes it better for us as the bank, as their banking partner.
Awesome. Yeah. What you're saying, it makes me kind of happy. I'm sorry. I'm a big believer in technology and all this, and even I dare to say user experience. And I think the end clients are very quick to adapt if something is good for them, regardless of what people say. Obviously, timing is very important, right? But once you see like, oh wow, this is an opportunity for me, I can, pay all my bills or repay my loans from my mobile phone, or I have some additional services and insight, and it's almost like people get excited with new possibilities as well. Regardless of, interesting enough, in my opinion, is also regardless of age or where they live, or so on. It's something. It's nowadays. It's very. All these products are made with the customer in mind, so they're customer centric. So they are catered to the customer. That's just my opinion, and I hope this will work for you. We are really running out of time. I don't want to take too much of your time. Just want to cover one or two more questions, and then we already have a lot of questions from our audience here. So we'll try to address those as well. And some of those are very detailed, so those will take time as well. Last thing from your perspective, I is from the perspective of a finance and lending company, as you said, Zurich is, and a more traditional, let's say, more established uh, business like the Rural Bank of San Antonio. What are the challenges for the sector in the years to come, even before COVID? Let's say, let's talk about a 5-10 year period. What we noticed at already, and we collect a lot of data as well, obviously, and we noticed, especially in the Philippines, there is obviously, like in rural banking, especially, like market consolidation. There is less and less rural banks. There's half the rural banks that you had 20 years ago now, and but the number of branches is growing, which means by default that the rural banks that are staying, that they're getting their a firm foot, and they're getting bigger. But then that means also a lot of them are disappearing. What is your outcome or perspective for like the next 5 to 10 years for those industries in the Philippines concretely, since we're in this market?
um, I can't say, I can't definitely say what will happen, though internally I can see, like, for example, our bank's concerns, and a lot of it has to do just with being able to um, change our perception on modernization,
Hmm.
uh, and because I think that's one of our big challenges now, which is uh, it's like there are all of these modern tools for improving the way that we do business and the way that we conduct our services. But it's just it's taking some time for people to uh, fully fully accept that. And the challenge I can't really say what the challenges are like in general, but these seem to be very particular challenges that sort of
Mm.
um, I don't know, they accrue and it becomes very like they stack on each other, and it becomes kind of a bigger and bigger concern internally. So uh, you know, what I see for rural banks is you're right. There's a lot of like market consolidation. Um, Even BSP is encouraging kind of smaller rural banks to form partnerships or for promoting mergers and acquisitions among them. Um, but I think what will happen is uh, I think it's all going to be determined by consumer behavior. So uh, once once our customers start expecting, or once our customers have sort of uh, experienced, like I think better services, they're just going to go there. And we're no longer in a position. At least rural banks are no longer in a position to kind of have a captured market. And I think that was kind of the main reason why, like for example, our organization, like our bank, we our kind of road to digitalization was it took such a long time because our customers based in the areas that we serve don't necessarily expect this, and because they're not expecting improved services, we don't necessarily and because with lack of competition, we don't necessarily push for these improved services. But then now I think, if you can very easily create a bank account without even having to visit a branch, would you still enter one of our branches? And I think that's a bit of a existential question for us, because we need to figure out whether or not like our customers will say, because I think in general, like our customers, if you look at the age distribution of our customers, we have quite older customers, and we're not just somehow by I guess uh, by preference, older customers like to transact within rural banks,
Mhm.
um, and I think that's because of they've seen the branches there for such a long time. There's kind of that feeling of safety of that this establishment has been with the community for such a long time. But then younger and younger customers are going kind of to different, I don't know, to either commercial banks or these international banks that provide you know branchless banking transactions, and that just sort of makes us that's just a growing concern. And so we need to be able to figure out ways of uh, providing competitive service that will keep our customers and grow that customer base.
Interesting. That's an, I would say, excellent point to finish off this first part. I would say what you said is basically very important. I think, like the lack of competition, or just for the sake of being always there, um, doesn't doesn't preclude that it's gonna stay that way, or doesn't preclude that you can be complacent, or it doesn't preclude that you don't have to engage with digital products, right? It's something that you have to be well aware of, because times are probably changing. I mean, by definition now, faster than any time before, and they will change faster in the future. uh, and so thinking about this as part of your, you know, core business strategy is probably very crucial. um, Ron, thank you so much. This is very insightful. I'm sorry I took much more time than I promised of yours. Let's try and answer a few questions. There's quite a few, so let's try and address them. One that came early in this conversation is from Mr. Bocario, and he said, "Have you already implemented the centralized evaluation of your loan applications? If yes, how did InstaFin help you do it, considering the various locations of your offices?
So yes, we have centralized the evaluation. Uh, I guess
Mm,
what we've done is we've created a team in our head office to, and we've instructed that team and we've trained them on the policies. For example, we've created a separate kind of KYC assessment team and a credit assessment team. So uh, we and they're just we just trained them to be technical experts on the basic KYC requirements and the basic credit requirements. And so if those two things check out, so essentially we just created a kind of a workflow where all applications go through these two teams, and then out comes just a uh, credit assessment, which very easily we can make a decision on depending on our risk appetite.
and I think this, I would assume this speeds up and streamlines your processes hugely, as opposed to what you said before, right? Like a more decentralized solution.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that would be. Um, I would assume there's another question about may I know the packages? I would assume these are the Iridium packages. This is a bit of a longer explanation that it takes. Feel free to reach out to us at with via emails and whatever. Actually, even social media. You can reach us out through knowledge@iridium.com or even hello@iridium.com, and then we can talk more in details about what Ron and myself discussed. InstaFin, the core banking system, but also the additional services. And one thing that we are very proud at Aradian is, with all our products, and I hope, Ron, you're not going to disagree. It's like a one cost. It's a subscription model, but and it's obviously it's everything is in the cloud, and but what there are no hidden costs. We have this thing when we call one subscription, and we want to include everything in it. So it includes everything, what people often ask us about, oh, what about implementation, and what about running costs of servers and everything. And we just always respond, there's like one price, and where we calculate this based on your portfolio and your user base. This is it. This is what you're paying yearly, and you can opt out all the time. So there is no this, oh, this is what you're paying, but then, oh, let us just, this is an additional thing because we have to send our people to your office for like 2 weeks or something like this. But anyways, please do email
Yeah.
us, or I'm gonna even find. Yeah, sorry, Ron, you were saying.
If I may add here, I think the one cost, it's a bit funny because I think it was like it sort of changed our behavior towards the way that we look at the system utilization. Because I think if it were like modular payments, you would go, oh, okay, this is what I need. Oh, this is what I need. So I'm going to pay this and this and this and this. But then because it's kind of this, it comes as a one package bundle, it kind of made us think, okay, so how do we squeeze like the value from this? Like what, like how do we, uh, it's like how do we get like effectively what we're paying for? So it really pushed our internal team to kind of figure out different ways to solve some internal problems, internal concerns, and so it's just a change of behavior in that kind of a subscription model kind of does that to you, where you kind of, okay, how do you, like how do we uh, make use of this? How do we because it's already there and it's something that you're paying for, so you're trying to get as much value from that.
Hmm. Perfect. Thank you, Ron. Another question from Mr. Giancarlo here. It says, and it's basically along the lines of what you just said as well. So it's a good segue. Uh, how did you evaluate, assess the reasonableness of the acquisition cost of InstaFin vis-a-vis the requirements of your bank? So this is a change management question and evaluation question, I guess. And you said it was a long process as well, right?
Yeah, I think because generally there are two approaches here, and one is where you evaluate like your existing costs and uh, what your what you're spending to do all of these things, what you've spent and what you continue to spend in terms of maintenance costs for your current software provider. And then and if you evaluate that, then it comes out that ultimately it's sort of equal, or one is more than the other, then that helps you make your decision. But I think what would be, or what was more productive for us, was kind of looking at the potential growth from operations, because I think we were already reaching kind of a ceiling in terms of what our operations can do. It's like we have an existing software, and that software could only allow us to service X amount of customers. And every time we try to kind of go beyond that, we simply couldn't anymore, based on with the resources that we have. And so if you evaluate it in this way, I think, or when we evaluated it, we recognized that what the system would do is kind of open up all of these operational opportunities to grow the business. And so because we are kind of investing in growth, we are that's how we added to the justification of the acquisition cost of Insafin.
Perfect. And I mean, it's definitely something to consider as well. And when evaluating this. Thank you, Mr. Bocaria, for all these questions. I hope our answers, actually Ron's answers, were very good for you. Again, if you have any additional ones, please reach out to us. Ron, there is another question from an anonymous attendee and saying, like, how did you handle recording of assets of the bank, since Instafin still do not have asset management facility? And how are you monitoring the recording of the depreciation of your fixed assets? Some more technical questions. Are you still doing it through Excel or manually?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very technical question. So the first part is that's being done manually. I think that the asset management facility, we have to do that manually, because I think when you close an account, you need to create another kind of acquired asset GL, and sort of that's since it's really kind of monitoring since it's just kind of depreciation, really. It's a you're just monitoring the asset. It's not that difficult, so we're doing that manually.
Mm-hmm.
And same with exactly, depreciation, we're doing that manually.
All right, cool. That's a good answer. So but it's something that it's very, I would say, minor to your operations, right? Like something that you wouldn't define as a major feature, right?
Yeah, it's not that. I mean, it would be nice to automate that, but and I think there are workarounds for that. And one thing that we're doing now is we're looking at how to kind of automate that in a way, because there are workarounds. It's just you have to figure it out yourself, I guess, how you would like to do it. Yeah.
Thank you. Another anonymous question saying, hi Ron, according to you, what is the opportunity cost for a rural bank of not digitalizing in the current environment? This is very interesting. We talked about this. In my opinion, it's very high, but what do you think, Ron?
Opportunity cost.
Yeah.
It means that you're not gonna digitalize.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can double down. If you choose not to digitalize, you're just investing in a different path. So if you're going to invest in a different path, I guess it just means that you're not, since opportunity cost is about like the potential business, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's everything. Like since I really believe that digitalization is really investment in digitalization is investment in growth, then it just means that you're not going to grow. So
And like a side question from me, do you think there is a future somehow for like institutions going like, oh, what you said as well, rural banks are usually very traditional institutions. They've been, I don't want to say they had a monopoly in a specific region or locality, but then you had like this strong even let's say branding. But would you say that there is a possibility for them to go, okay, yeah, this is how we've been doing things here. People know us here. We don't want to grow. We're fine. No one's gonna touch us here. Is that a valid argument?
I mean, not anymore, because we're seeing it now. I mean, we're seeing that um, we're seeing finance institute like nationwide financial institutions kind of eating into our customer base. Where I think, uh, I, I mean, an example would be, I think a commonly used example is home credit. If you're familiar with home credit, it's surprising because even in our areas, we have a lot of customers who are also customers of home credit,
Mhm.
where previously it would not have. It's kind of strange to see that kind of penetration of um, such a uh, digital service, since they don't really, they're not traditional like ordinary financial institutions. I think you apply online or via the app, and then there are just kind of these distribution points. The fact that they can do that means that they're already eating into the market that you serve.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely a concern to consider. But like another pretty long question by Mr. Ferdi Kizon, and says like, uh, what is what are your compelling reasons for choosing Already and Instafin? A relative. This is the first question out of three, so let's go one by
Mhm.
one. A relative. So what are your compelling reasons for choosing Already and Instafin relative to other systems you evaluated as your core banking system?
Okay. I think what uh, part of that is the relationship that we have. Apart from the service, which is already in itself much, much, much better than what we used to use. Um, the the support towards growth is one of the things that has convinced me personally that this is kind of a good that Oradian has been a very good partner with us towards our kind of strategic goals. Um, and but that's it's kind of like you get what you invest, like you get as much as you put into it. And so um, if if you want to nurture that partnership, or if that's what you're looking for, then definitely that's something that you will get if you put if you invest the time and effort into it.
Yeah, I think.
But
Yeah,
but
sorry.
from a purely like from a if you're looking at it like apples to apples, oh, you're looking for asset management, you're looking for loan origination system, you're looking for deposit management software. Um, uh, like there, some of those things, I guess you can sort of look at it as the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Because maybe individually you might find like a better service, like this one service is slightly better elsewhere, but then the totality of the Oradian and the Instafin service is generally, in my opinion, more than the sum of its parts.
All right, this is a great definition. We might use this in the future. Thank you, Ron. But like, um, second part of the question from Sukizan is like, what are the greatest challenges your bank faced during the core banking system CBS implementation? And this is, we know, a very challenging part for every core banking system. And what are your present challenges with respect to the CBS usage?
um, I think for all it's always going to be change management. It's
Mhm.
always going to be what people are used to versus the potential benefit that they're going to get from the system. And uh, for some reason, just behaviorally, people don't like change. And so even if
It's a very human
the
thing.
Yeah, it's a very human thing. And so even if like you present all of these benefits, there's still going to be that resistance to change. And um, we've seen this in previous, because we've changed core banking systems before, and that was always the problem, where not everybody is on board with using a new system. Not everybody sees the benefit of those changes, and it's only at the top level where these decisions are made. And so um, I guess that's one of the biggest challenges, because that will kind of prevent the full acceptance of the new system, and so you won't be able to kind of squeeze as much of the value that you were looking at when you evaluated the system at the beginning.
Mhm.
So yeah, present challenges. Uh, so far, I mean, it's still change management.
Still kind of almost a thought process kind of
Mhm.
issue more than like a features issue, I would say. Um, and let me just add like one. It's almost the answer to the first part of this question. It was and already, and this is what we are very proud of. And I don't know if we're good at communicating it, but it's this. Well, I call this incentive alignment, right? Where it's in our best interest for the Rural Bank of San Antonio or Zurich or any other client to grow. It's and because we grow as well, and we have this saying, "You grow, we grow," where the more you grow, the more our clients grow is better for us in the long term because it's a subscription model. It goes year in year out. If our clients fail, if our customers fail, like we fail as well. So we with any customer we want them to succeed, so it's in our best interest. So we try to do everything, and this is, you mentioned our customer success team at the beginning, and Philip, and this is core part of our product. So it's not just the software, it's the whole customer success journey that we call, that we want to like, oh yeah, it's, we want you to grow, and we want to catch up with you or with any of our customers, say like, okay, what are the products that you're looking at, and how do you grow, and how do you scale up, and how do you improve your operations? Because by just selling uh, the software to you and saying like, okay, we're done and we sold our deal, it's not very viable for us in the long term as well. That's my opinion. But there is a third part of this question. Sorry Ron, this is taking so long, but the questions are kind
No
of good.
problem.
I said one of the main decision factor for rural banks in selecting a core banking system is the cost of adoption, and we mentioned this as well. I hope you don't mind me asking about cost. Could you share with us the asset size of your bank and how much overall budget did you allocate for your CBS acquisition, and how much was actually spent? How much is the monthly, yearly recurring cost, and ballpark figures or percentages would suffice. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Ron, obviously this is at your discretion. You don't have to answer, especially not in numbers. Maybe percentages,
Mhm.
it's more relevant, but again, it is definitely your choice how you address this question.
I see. So um, well, because it sort of yeah, it requires a bit of a change of mentality,
Mhm.
and this sort of comes with what like the whole idea of a subscription model rather than one-time license acquisition. Um, that's why it's a bit of it's a perception thing. If uh, I guess the analogy that I can come up with for this is really, I don't know if um, uh, sorry, it's like for it used to be you purchased a license for Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
Like you used to buy like, oh, Microsoft 2007, Microsoft 2011, and then that's yours forever. And but these days there's uh, what your Microsoft no longer structures its products on that model. It's subscription based. So you have Office 365, and what they do is you essentially pay monthly for all of their products.
Yeah.
And yeah, so many services are kind of shifting towards that type of model, and so you're basing this on since you can technically since you're incurring the costs monthly, and in our case we're incurring it annually, we're looking at the cost against the opportunity for growth. And
Mhm.
so I think that's so the cost of adoption in terms of, like, if you're talking about actual like amount, it's difficult to gauge the value of that, because it's always going to be against your own operations. And
Mhm.
so, like, if you can um, and I think kind of in general, it's like, I mean, you can think about it as a, I don't know, percentage of your income, and then so that's effectively what you're budgeting against. Like, you earn X amount uh, per year, and so uh, how much of that will you allocate towards I guess cost of Instafin, and then without Instafin, would you be able to hit that same target? uh, you know it's up to you whether or not that's you're capable of doing that without such a flexible software. So it's not like it's very difficult, because it's not apples to apples. Yeah.
It's almost like in other industries what you would call an R&D budget or an R&D.
Yes.
How much you want to reinvest the next year from your income into developing new products. Obviously, that's developing new products is not the same analogy here, but I
Yeah.
would say R&D budget would maybe
But,
if yeah,
so,
like
sorry, because I think it comes back to the second question too, because I just remembered one of the challenges is also kind of the um, user acceptance and how people think about their roles within the branch or within the operations. Because ordinarily, there's always someone reviewing, like, let's say, the teller's work, or the cashier's work. There's always a manager, or there's always some supervisor going over their work. And so there's that from their perspective, that's how that's how it is. But then what happens, as I guess in the system design of Instafin, uh, the accountability for the work is really pushed to the end user. So, for example, we no longer need to validate. We don't need somebody looking over the shoulder of the teller, and so that they're sort of held more accountable. And because they're more accountable, like, it just changes the way that you do business. It just changes the way that you will conduct your operations. And so I think that's why it's kind of a strange thing to talk about if you're not yet familiar with what those
yes.
changes will look like.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, like, as well, I think, yes, I mean, the teller example is probably very good. Yes, you can talk about straight numbers and budget and percentages of your yearly budget you spend on your, but then you also have to take into account all this stuff, oh, so we don't have to control. We save so much time and we save so much man hours in doing this operations that we used to do manually before, or that we used to do but now we don't have to. So it's
Mhm.
like a more complicated calculation, but it's definitely something that is um ballpark you can estimate. um it's actually a question along those lines is the next one from an anonymous attendee, saying, "Hi, sir. We have been using a local on-premise system and wondering how secure it is to store our clients' data in a cloud environment." I mean, I can answer it as well, but Ron,
Mhm.
did you have these concerns as well from your perspective, from your board, and the change management?
I think the it is a like the question of security is really with the partner, and
Hmm.
it's whether, like, on our side, um, I think from the company side, from the bank side, the board is generally concerned. I think because from the perspective of like traditional on-premise operations, you need access to that, right? So you need it's like, are you? I don't know. It's a bit. It's it's that acceptance of cloud technology in general. So I
I
mean,
mean,
it's secure.
it's a common concern, and
Mhm.
and it's good that people have these concerns, I think. And it's actually, I would even dare to say, more secure, obviously, because I'm speaking, of course, from the perspective of Radian. We have backups in 3 locations, and we keep testing them according to all the certificates and security standards that, on a global best practice level. So this is not even like, oh, we are like locally the best secured data, or in our town or in our country. And like any industry, like any profession, it has its best practices, globally and regionally and locally. And so we really adhere. And I mean, this is, again, this kind of falls within that feature of that I talked about before: customer success, and then caring for customers. This is definitely necessary condition for us to service financial institutions. If something happens, and if data disappears or gets lost, we are in big trouble as well. So we want to make, again, it's basically incentives aligned. We want to make sure that this is not going to happen, because if this happens, basically our credibility is gone, right? Because then we can't
Yeah.
go and go to Ron and say like, oh, Ron, look, you want to get a new product from us, and I don't know, now we have mobile banking, for example, and what do you think about that? But you said like, oh, but you guys lost all my data like a year ago, and I was hacked. So this is, I guarantee this is actually safer than on premise. On premise, you have all these other challenges that obviously it's not even unbreakable, but then of course you have these issues of and Ron, you mentioned typhoons before, and especially in the Philippines, where earthquakes are no stranger, volcanoes, and so it's something that the cloud actually solves better than on premise, and
Yeah.
that's where we are now. Yeah.
And I think there's just that it's a behavioral thing where, of course, you think you feel safer if you see it, right? It's,
Yeah.
you feel safer that your money is under your bed, or that your files are in a hard drive. um, but then, if you think about it that way, your bed isn't safer than a bank. And I think generally, like, the analogy that I like to think of is, this is just how things modernize.
Mhm.
Where as things modernize, you just enlist the help of other people, and you just need to kind of trust in those partnerships. Like, I don't know, like, you keep your money in a bank, and that's not you, but you feel secure that it's in a bank. Most car owners don't know how to fix their own cars. I mean, just because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a good car owner. I mean, the general practice is that you bring it to experts, and I think that in this case, we we entrust the storage of that data uh, uh, to these cloud service providers.
Yeah, we had one of the webinars we had a long time ago, actually, as COVID started, I think in April, was with our head of infrastructure, Domagoj, who we can, if anyone is interested, we can even share the white paper explaining how everything works in terms of security from the technical perspective. And this is, let me repeat this. This is a super valid concern, and we want all our customers to ask us that because
Mhm.
yes, it's a crucial concern. But then it's luckily it's a question that we can
Mhm.
answer. Um, I'm gonna speed up, Ron, because this is really taking a lot of your time now. And
Sure,
we're
sure, sure.
gonna be done within the hour. We have another 3 questions to answer here. Saying hi, Sir Ron, from an anonymous attendee, saying, with so many cloud-based systems in the market these days, what made you select a Radian as CBS provider? Not once, but twice. Thank you. Oh yeah, that's
Mhm.
probably referring to both Zurich and Rural Bank of San Antonio, but also maybe to additional services, right?
Um, I feel we had touched on this
Yeah,
a
we
couple of
talked
questions
about it.
ago also. Um, but there are a lot, and I think that's just based on, again, it's a subjective thing, on what on because each bank has their own considerations. And I think coming into it, because generally our bank has um, uh, has very simple products. We don't have. I guess that sort of that also helps that our bank is quite it's quite it's less complex. So that lack of complexity sort of allows us to um, make allows us to see this as a easier and more beneficial partnership.
Hmm. Perfect. Yeah, we talked about this in that. It's also partially my fault because these questions were coming in as we were talking. So
Mhm.
maybe we addressed it later. And but it's just sometimes good to go through it again. And how the system has helped on the operational efficiency side. For instance, IT related costs. That's an interesting question. Yeah.
I mean, what are IT related costs? It's uh, i-
Yeah.
you mean does this mean specifically IT related costs?
Well, it used it as an example. For instance, and obviously operational efficiency. Probably we could talk for another hour or two,
Yeah.
but if we focus just on this part, on maybe what about just IT related costs? Having.
I mean, I think operational efficiency. I think that's kind of
Mhm.
the easier question answered. It's like uh, as I said previously, if let's say you're booking a repayment, normally that repayment, at least traditionally in our sense, that repayment requires uh, the preparation of the OR, the encoding on the system, the validation from the bookkeeper, then transferring that cash. So all of these processes to ensure that there's proper control and proper kind of oversight over those transactions. Um, uh, Essentially, with Instafin, that repayment is booked and that's it. So it's in real time posted on the proper GL items, and so there's no there's no other process tied to that transaction apart from just seeing that in the report.
Um, Perfect. And last question here, saying how long has the partnership been between the Royal Bank of San Antonio and Aradian? And so far, can you give quantitative description of the benefits gained? For example, percentage of reduction on overtime pay, reduction of past due loans, improvement on cost to income ratio, etc. Well, we talked about the length of the relationship is pretty new, so
Mhm.
but you have this experience from Zurich perspective, so maybe you can address it in that way.
Okay. Um,
Not a big question.
yeah, this is well for RPSA and Irradiant again. It's yeah, you're right. It's very new, and so we don't have enough data to confirm this. But the data that we do have is Zurich's data, and what we saw initially was the rate of the default rate just went down by 50%. I mean that's uh, yeah, it's 50%. If I remember correctly, like we were kind of surprised by the figures. Also, it was because we're primarily dealing with very risky customers. I think uh, our rate was around from one in I think one in I think it's 1 in 10 to 1 in 20 that
Mhm.
would and just by operationalizing and kind of implementing consistent loan policies and which Instafin has helped kind of set for Zurich, the default rate went down by half.
Mhm.
But then this pandemic happened, and
Yeah.
so it changes also our uh, our analysis and uh, so it's in terms of the repayment and past due accounts, this pandemic has really affected us all, and so that uh, it's not the same analysis anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, yes, of course, and I believe like um, all this, and to be fair, we touched aspects of this question before as well, like for example, percentage of reduction of overtime pay, or you said also like the way of controlling people's work, etc., etc. There's all improvements there. There is like one last questions in the chat, and this is kind of for me. Sorry, Ron. It says like asking me how come Cantillon Bank is not an InstaPay nor PesoNet participant bank, according to the BSP, but are their bank customers already able to do transactions or their accounts without having to visit the branches? So maybe Ron, sorry, like we had in our last webinar, Tanya from Cantillon, maybe that's referring to it as well. But we can't really comment on the individual business strategies of our customers. I mean, but InstaFin is able to integrate with both InstaPay and PesoNet, right? There is, as you might know, there is a lengthy and approval process and membership required for both of those networks. So there might be rural banks in the process of becoming members which are not visible yet. So maybe that's one. But again, a question probably that if we had Tanya here like a few weeks ago would be much more appropriate, so they can answer. Ron, this was a great pleasure. I'm sorry it took so much of your time, but it was
Oh,
very insightful.
all right, no problem.
And
I
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Unfortunately, we couldn't meet in person this year. I hope next year we're gonna call what we call this Oradian Community Summit, organized in person for a real event somewhere in the Philippines. Last year was Manila. Hopefully, we can do it. And I mean, I do miss the Philippines. It's a beautiful country. I do miss travel. So hopefully it's gonna happen. Yeah.
And I miss those raffles.
We gotta do raffles as well online, but it's not the same. We like to do raffles as well. This is something. This is a custom that we're doing more and more with our other customers and other markets, and even in Europe now. That, but it kind of started in the Philippines. We learned most of that there. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Ron. Have a great afternoon and evening, and great end of the week in Manila. If anyone has any questions by now, oh, not everyone has left yet. So by now, please feel free to ask us. If you somehow want to talk to Ron or some, I'm sure you can find his contacts, or you can probably a lot of people here are also members of RBOP, etc. So more than happy, Ron. I hope we're gonna have a chance soon to talk again. I'm gonna be much more correct in estimating how much time we need then. I'm sorry for this.
No problem. It's no problem at all. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you,
Ron.
everyone.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.